iDriveSoCal is brought to you by the very best auto retailers from across Southern California. When it's time for you to buy, or even just kick the tires on the idea of buying, just go to iDriveSoCal.com and click on dealers. iDriveSoCal.com, click on dealers, and get connected. Now, on with the podcast.
What's so fascinating about this sector is exactly how fast-moving it now is becoming. On the regulatory side, things are moving quickly too. There won't be any more traffic jams in 2028, I can assure you. You'll order a flying driverless taxi from the Uber-NASA joint venture called Uber Air Taxis. I completely agree with Mayor Garcetti when he says that LA will be the world capital of transportation technology. And I think that LA CoMotion can help that vision along, but it can also be the place where the industry meets once a year. That's really why we're investing in this. It can be very, very important for LA and for the world and for this emerging ecosystem globally around mobility.
Welcome to iDriveSoCal, the podcast all about mobility in the automotive capital of the United States, Southern California. I'm Tom Smith, and in this episode, we continue my discussion with John Russant. John is the founder of New Cities, an international nonprofit organization that focuses on improving life in cities around the world. New Cities recently hosted a 4-day event all about the future of mobility. LA CoMotion took place right here in the Los Angeles Arts District. Some very bold and exciting predictions were made about how we'll be getting around LA in the near future. What follows is the second half of my discussion with John. So that's here in the United States, and you have a global perspective. Yeah. But before we get to the global, and maybe you can tie that in, what's changed? Because there was electric cars back when we were figuring out if it was going to be, a Ford or a car company that didn't make it. And then goes back to the beginning of cars. Yeah. But then fast forward to just a few years ago, there was all the commotion about the film Who Killed the Electric Car, right? And then we fast forward to the economic collapse, and I remember paying $5 a gallon for gas here in LA, and of course, I had 2 V8 vehicles that I was driving that were just guzzlers. So I lead up to a few things have changed, but in your perspective, what's changed that is allowing this
revolution
massive clip that we're experiencing?
Yeah. I think it's a bunch of things happening at the same time. One is certainly technology. Yeah. So whether it's battery technology, electric cars are now very competitive, even without massive subsidies. We've gotten, the efficiency down. The range is amazing. Forget Tesla at 300 or 350 miles. The new Chevy Bolt, it's amazing, wonderful car. And it's got 250, 260 mile range at a very, very, very competitive price. It's a joy to ride. So you have technology, and then you have, of course, autonomous vehicle technology is suddenly real because of the IT revolution. You have the very different approach of millennials, and then after millennials, Generation Z, etc., to ownership, to traveling, to having a driver's license. The cost of car ownership is very high here. And then you have sort of Uber and Lyft bursting onto the scene. And, maybe it makes sense not to have a car, but when you need to go across the city, you use an Uber or Lyft, you use your bike or use other means, use public transportation. So people are, my 12-year-old kid, for example, it's very, very likely he will never have a driver's license or own a car. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine that? I'm still of the generation, I guess, like you, Tom. I had, road trips, the idea of having my car, that was freedom. Yeah. But freedom is, I think, it's thought of in other ways now by people who are much younger than us. So that's a big shift. And I think also, like in LA, I think people had enough of the smog and traffic jams and things like that. And then you look at 71 or 72% of the voters voted for a tax increase last November, a year ago, which gave us Measure M, which is, $122 billion for public transportation infrastructure. Wow. So I think it's people's perceptions are just changing. We're at a turning point. Absolutely. We're certainly exiting the hydrocarbon age. We are the internal combustion engine and those wonderful V8 engines that you loved and I loved. Mm-hmm. Those will be a thing of the past. They'll be in museums and, that's life and it's good. Thank God.
Yeah, I know.
The other thing I think let me just add one little thing. And that is, it's become also a planetary issue. So it's not only the smog in LA, but, with the unbelievably rapid economic development of China and India, for example, you have billions of people wanting to have their own cars. And the planet cannot support that. I mean, it was one thing if only Americans and some wealthy Europeans drove cars. Right. The planet could support that, but the planet cannot support 6 or 7 billion people driving cars every day. And we see that in, the smog in Delhi and Shanghai and in Beijing. It's killing hundreds of millions of people.
And speaking of other cities, you're probably a good candidate to answer the question, how does LA compare to some of its competitive cities around the world from a perspective of all things mobility, and where we are with technology, in front, behind, catching up?
Well, look, there's a hell of a lot of catch up to do. But I mean, one of the interesting things about LA and Southern California is that it's like this great, big, amazing Petri dish where you can experiment things because you have to solve the problems. I mean, look, Copenhagen is light years ahead of LA or any other city in the United States in terms of, sustainable mobility. I mean, people bike there. Their bike lanes are bigger than the car lanes. They have a plan to become absolutely carbon neutral by very soon. I think sort of 15 years, something like that. Any Nordic city is way ahead of any U.S. city in terms of sort of new mobility. Any big Asian city like Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore, Taipei, those big four have, public transport that is just a dream. It's efficient. It's delays are in milliseconds. You could eat off the floor. It's reasonable. It's efficient. But I think what's interesting about LA is that everything is to be built now, so we can leapfrog a lot of things. I mean, if you think of, we don't really have. I mean, metro, of course, is ramping up, but the public transportation here is, it's very, very in its infancy compared to, let's say, my hometown of New York. But in New York, we have this legacy system of a creaking transportation infrastructure that was put in, well over 100 years ago for a city that was, a third of the size that it is now. And, the tens or if not hundreds of billions of dollars New York will have to put into maintenance. I mean, forget about putting in new lines. So here we are in 2017, and Metro is now just starting its expansion program in LA. So I think, LA is going to be such a more wonderful city in 10 years because of everything that's happening in mobility, I think.
So you mentioned LA in comparison to New York. Do you see, with the change that LA inevitably needs to be making, do you see at some point in time that LA becomes more progressive than New York in mobility, in public transportation?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it already is in many ways. I mean, I think its plans are more progressive. I don't know quite how you define progressive, But I think this place is much more forward-looking than any big city in the United States.
10 years, and I mentioned I listened to Mayor Garcetti's talk that he gave at the event earlier
on Thursday morning. Yeah.
And he mentioned the Olympics and going to be here in 2028. Okay. For a lot of us, that's going to be like a blink of the eye. Boom, here they are. Yeah. What does mobility in Los Angeles and cities, the Los Angeles city, if there you see some other massive factors that are adjusting, what does that look like when the Olympics are here?
Oh, okay. Well, let me have a stab at that one. That means, Tom, let's say you're flying in from, I know you live here now, but let's say you're flying in to the LA Olympics in 2028 from Honolulu, because you'll be living in Hawaii by then on the beach. I can see you.
Right, sure.
Okay, so you come in. You will have a driverless taxi. We'll pick you up because you would have ordered it when you're getting off the plane. It'll pick you up curbside at Terminal 6 at LAX, whisk you to your hotel. And the next morning you will
drive real quick. A driverless taxi will take me to my hotel.
Yeah.
Will there be traffic and congestion?
No. Of course, no. In fact, traffic jams will be this sort of quaint historic memory by that point.
2028.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There won't be any more traffic jams in 2028, I can assure you.
I'm smiling ear to ear as a Los Angeles driver right now.
Yeah. So your hotel, because you like the beach, you've come from Waikiki, so you're going to stay on the west side at some hotel in Santa Monica on the beach.
Okay.
But then LA CoMotion, of course, is downtown. So you could take an autonomous vehicle taxi, the same one that brought you in from the airport, and it'll take you about 20 minutes to get downtown from the beach in Santa Monica. But you decide you need to be there a little bit quicker, so you'll order a flying driverless taxi from the Uber NASA joint venture called Uber Air Taxis.
Flying driverless.
Oh yeah, completely driverless, of course.
By 2028.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good bet. And that'll take you in about 5 minutes from your hotel in Santa Monica to the site of LA CoMotion in the Arts District. And then to get back to LAX, you'll probably take an air taxi. That's really, the same one. And, just to tell you something, I was at the headquarters the other day, a few weeks ago, at LAX of LAWA, which is Los Angeles World Airports. It owns LAX.
Okay.
And they're now, as you may have heard, they have a massive airport expansion because they need a new runway, and this LA's booming, and so they have to expand the airport, and they have to put in a big new parking facility. Now, spending many, many millions of dollars for a new parking facility in 2017 it's a question mark over it, because you think, well, in 10 years' time, a lot of the cars are going to be autonomous. They'll be shared. People won't need to park at the airport. The whole point of autonomous vehicles is that cars are going to be used all the time instead of just 5% of the time, which is what most of us use our cars.
Right.
So why would you need a parking facility at the airport? So they put a lot of time into thinking about what this new parking facility, because they will need it over the next 10 years, but after. So they've designed it in such a way so that this new facility at LAX can be converted to an autonomous vehicle holding zone. So the fellow was explaining that to us, and then he said, and of course we're putting in a reinforced roof. And I said, oh, what's the reinforced roof for? And he said, well, that's for the people coming to the airport in personal vertical landing and takeoff vehicles. And I went, oh, okay. But my point is, that's being designed now in anticipation of what's coming. So the world is going to change very, very quickly, Tom.
Are those vertical transport carriers, are they electric?
Yes, they'll be electric.
So we have some pretty big innovation in batteries by way of weight that has to be.
But it's happening already. I mean, in fact, where we're sitting now at the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator in the heart of downtown Los Angeles, there's a terrific company called Ampere, which is developing an electric plane, battery-driven plane. And they're pretty far along, I can tell you. Great project.
So, thank you so much for joining me. This has been fun on both a personal and professional level. But before I let you go, what does what are your goals for LA CoMotion moving forward between now and the short term, the next few years, and then also we lead up to this very exciting time, as you described, for the 2028 Olympics? Well,
yeah. I mean, look, I completely agree with Mayor Garcetti, when he says that LA will be the world capital of transportation technology. I believe that. And I think that LA CoMotion can help that vision along, but it can also be the place where the industry meets once a year. And that's really why we're investing in this. We think it can be very, very important for LA and for the world and for this emerging ecosystem globally around mobility, whether it's people who are developing batteries or scooters or car manufacturers who are, repositioning themselves, software makers, material scientists. There is this emerging ecosystem around mobility, and they need a place to meet. So I think LA can be that.
Excellent. Anything I missed?
Not at all. Did a good job, man.
Okay. Well, hey, John, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Again.
Yeah, that was fun.
That wraps up this episode of iDriveSoCal. Thanks again to my guest, John Rossant, who's both the founder of New Cities as well as the new LA CoMotion event that will be going on every year. You can follow them at LA CoMotion Fest. I'm Tom Smith. Until next time, thank you so much. This episode of iDriveSoCal was engineered by Micah Palmquist and J-Dubs produced on site.